Inside a luxurious carriage, Chu Xiu, the protagonist of this story, slowly opened his eyes, gasping for breath like he'd run a marathon. He suddenly jolts upright, clutching his head as he exclaimed in shock, wanting to know just who was trying to kill him. But as he lifted his gaze and scanned the unfamiliar surroundings in confusion, he couldn't help wondering just where on earth he was. After all, just 10 minutes ago, his existence had been far from miserable. He was born into wealth, though his parents passed away early. They left behind an enormous fortune. His life consisted of nothing but indulgence and pleasure. He never had to worry about food or money, spending his days immersed at parties, alcohol, and women. As a fan of martial arts since childhood, his current obsession was the Great Jianghu, a grand and immersive martial arts game. And truth be told, Chu Xiu wasn't afraid of death. He had already enjoyed enough glory and luxury, living freely without regrets, far more comfortably than those hardship-bound young masters in novels. Compared to them, his life had been on easy mode. In fact, Chu Xiu never wanted to become a spoiled young master, but as the illegitimate son of the family, the youngest of the lot, he foolishly believed he had no right to involve himself in the family's business affairs. All matters concerning the family's business were handled by his elder brothers, leaving him completely sidelined. Anyway, back to the Great Jianghu game. Its storyline was vast and intricate, and the martial world it portrayed was astonishingly realistic, so realistic that it felt like a fully functional society. He found himself utterly immersed. While waiting for the third major update, he spared no expense to purchase a limited edition virtual reality headset. But who could have imagined that the moment he put it on, he would hear his brother's voice, declaring that his existence has always been a hidden threat. So he sincerely hoped Chu Xiu has a fun time in his next life. Immediately after that, the VR headset exploded with a boom. It blew his freaking head into mangled bits, leaving a headless corpse. And judging from the current situation, Chu Xiu finally realized he'd been transmigrated. Cursing with regret, he realized that acting harmlessly and becoming a useless loser in order not to be seen as a threat was still not enough to guarantee his safety. He was still targeted and killed, so was he wrong from the very beginning when he decided not to fight for power? Anyway, in that very moment, memories belonging to the original body came flooding in. It turned out he had transmigrated into someone who was also named Chu Xiu, an illegitimate son of the Chu family in Tongzhou Prefecture, Wei County within the state of Yan. He was the second of the Chu family's 4 sons, but his mother was just an ordinary concubine who died during a difficult labor giving birth to him. Because of that, he was completely neglected in the family. The original owner of this body used to be weak and reckless. Early on, he sided with the eldest brother, Chu Kai, in the battle for family headship. And as a result, he angered the third brother, who was also eligible for the position. He was framed and punished by being sent to serve as a manager in the Chu family's mining area in the southern mountains of Wei County. Originally, he was supposed to stay at the southern mountain mines for 3 years, but the Chu family recently decided to select an heir. And even as an illegitimate son who made a mistake, he was still eligible to participate, so he was called to the Chu family early. Right now, he was on his way back to the Chu manor. Chu Xiu reached out for a long sword, and as he unsheathed it, the gleaming blade reflected the face of a handsome young man. Yet between his brows lingered an unsettling softness, almost unmanly. Chu Xiu didn't like this expression very much. But since things had already come to this, he could only accept his new appearance. Suddenly, he froze, letting go of the sword. He abruptly realized his true identity. Before Chu Xiu transmigrated into the upcoming 3rd edition of the Great Jianghu, with the 2nd edition already at an end, the final boss of the 3rd edition was none other than Demon Lord Chu Xiu. The Demon Lord Chu Xiu was born into the Chu family of Tongzhou Prefecture, Wei County, state of Yan. And after a family upheaval, he went through many hardships, leading to a drastic change in personality, eventually setting him on the path of the Demon Lord. At the end of the story introduction, the Demon Lord Chu Xiu rebuilds the Kunlun Demon Sect, which was once incredibly glorious 1,000 years ago, and leading the 4 great demon venerables, he dominates the martial arts world with overwhelming demonic flames. And although he disliked this soft and effeminate appearance, judging from his name, looks, and background, he was undeniably the very Demon Lord Chu Xiu, the ultimate villain from the game. Thinking of this, Chu Xiu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He was destined to be a legendary figure in the martial world. But the problem was, since when did villains in games ever get a good ending? Wasn't every final boss in a game meant to be defeated? As Chu Xiu picked up the long sword once more, a cold glint flashed through his eyes as he questioned himself whether he was destined to fail. Chu Xiu's expression suddenly turned dark, almost demonic. In his past life, he chose a carefree life and didn't fight for power, but in the end, he died a miserable death. However, since the heavens gave him another chance, from that point forth, he would be the one to fight for power, the one dare not to cross. It was better for him to kill than to let others kill him. At that moment, the curtain of the luxurious carriage got lifted, and a beautiful maid with a graceful and alluring figure stepped inside. She feigned being surprised and asked her young master what had happened to make him pick up a sword. Anyway, according to the original body's memories, the maid in front of him was named Yue. She was sent by his third brother's biological mother. It was laughable that he actually thought she was assigned to him by the family and even doted on her quite a bit. But during the time at the Southern Mountain Mines, Yue didn't just use his name to throw her weight around, ruining his reputation. She also secretly provoked and tortured the miners to incite a riot. It was clearly an attempt to lead him to his death. Chu Xiu finally replied that it was nothing. He just dropped it. Yue felt a bit uneasy, wondering just what was wrong with Chu Xiu today. She noticed that his smile looked a bit creepy. She told Chu Xiu that the main road was hard to travel because of the rain for the past few days, so she suggested they take the side path through Yuanbao town. It was a bit of a shortcut. Reiterating what he just heard, Chu Xiu added that he'd heard those small paths to remote mountain regions often attract bandits. Yue quickly replied that it was just a rumor. The Chu family's carriages have passed through here so many times, and nothing had ever happened. She lowered her voice, then said that the long journey has made her sweat so much, and now she feels gross. She wants to get back to the manor early to bathe so he can serve her young master properly. Apparently, the old Chu Xiu would have agreed without the slightest suspicion. But now he only stared at her coldly. A strange, ghostly smile still lingered at the corner of Chu Xiu's lips, making Yue increasingly uneasy. She even had the urge to step back when he reached out and lightly pinched her cheek. In a coquettish tone, Yue whined that it hurts. Chu Xiu gave a smile that didn't reach his eyes and stated that he would indulge her. They would go through Yuanbao town, and as for the servants, she would leave the arrangements to her, just like always. Chu Xiu signaled for her to leave, and Yue, momentarily stunned for a second there, thought he'd noticed something. But it seems she was overthinking it. Meanwhile, Chu Xiu, with disdain evident in his eyes, was very much aware that there was something fishy going on the very second the bitch of a maid insisted on the path of Yuanbao town. However, he had decided to go anyway, because there was a certain opportunity waiting in Yuanbao town. Having been reborn in this life, Chu Xiu's true advantage wasn't being the future demon lord. It was that he was familiar with the plots of the first two editions of the game. By his calculations, he should be at the beginning of the first edition's plot. There should be over 20 years before the third edition begins. And he knew every major and minor historical event of this world for the next 20 years. If he remembers correctly, right now in Yuanbao town, there was a massive opportunity waiting for him. In the town of Yuanbao, an ancient yet bustling settlement came to view where Chu Xiu searched for a fateful opportunity that could change his life forever. And traveling alongside him was the bitch Yue. She cautiously informed Chu Xiu that Yuanbao town was far less prosperous than Tongzhou Prefecture. So what was there to look around for? But Chu Xiu was searching for a shop in particular, the secret box shop. And apparently, secret boxes, as they called them, was a major feature of the Great Jianghu world. Legend has it that 10,000 years ago, the world experienced a great catastrophe of heaven and earth, and countless martial arts sects were destroyed in the apocalypse. But before the catastrophe, a formation grandmaster developed something called the secret box to store supreme treasures and classics. But to prevent the sect's heritage from being severed due to destruction by the heavenly tribulation. The materials of secret boxes vary, as do their shapes and sizes. However, the better the material, the stronger the formation power, and generally the better the stored items. After the heavenly tribulation, a large number of secret boxes were handed down. Since the production method has long been lost, existing secret boxes become completely scrapped once opened. They can be described as limited edition blind boxes, causing countless people in Jianghu to flock to them like ducks. Secret boxes don't necessarily contain valuable things. Although some can yield unique miracles and treasures, most are empty or contain useless items. Just like drawing blind boxes, what a person gets depends entirely on luck. Carrying the knowledge of his previous life, Chu Xiu stepped into the mystery box shop without the slightest hesitation. He glanced around and noticed how deserted the place was, then asked if this was the only mystery box shop in Yuanbao town. Of course, the shopkeeper stated as a matter of fact, before adding that even the trashiest of these secret boxes cost 10 taels of silver each. And those coming to Yuanbao town were poor ghosts escorting goods. They don't even earn 10 taels for one trip, so how many would they dare to even gamble their luck on? But the moment he realized Chu Xiu might actually be a rich customer, his eyes lit up. His tone changed instantly, turning into a flattery praise as he declared that those poor ghosts can't afford them. But surely a young master like Chu Xiu can. These secret boxes were all found in ruins within the southern barbarian mountains. The price was absolutely affordable and fair. And Chu Xiu just arrived in this world and urgently need a powerful cultivation technique. Although the Chu family was a major clan in Tongzhou with inherited techniques, the original body owner was neglected since childhood, had no resources, no guidance, and didn't even enter the gate. As a result, he was still only at the body tempering realm, the lowest of martial arts cultivation. However, in the path of martial arts, to enter the gate, one must first experience the 3 realms of body refining. Thus, tempering muscles and bones, refining the body. Muscles and bones become robust, strength becomes superior, and 99% of martial artists in the Jianghu were at this realm because one can reach it just by cultivating crude external hard skills. Above this are the blood condensation realm and the pre-heaven realm, which can be considered true experts. Chu Xiu remembered during this time, a guy from a servant background bought an ordinary secret box in Yuanbao town. And as a result, he opened a supreme technique, later founded a sect, and became a grandmaster. But these secret boxes were cheap goods, and the quality looked very low. So he couldn't help wondering if they really could yield a lucky chance. Just then, a guy with an arrogant and desperate expression strode in, wanting to purchase 2 secret boxes. The shopkeeper recognized him immediately as Li Jing, a lackey of the Li family. So trying to be helpful, the shopkeeper advised him that secret boxes was just like gambling. But since the young master Li values him highly at present, he should save his money and befriend the stewards instead. Who knows, maybe he can earn a promotion as a steward too. Li Jing sneered and replied that even if he becomes a steward, he'd still be a servant of the Li family, so he'd rather gamble. If he happens to open a peerless divine art, wouldn't he rise to prominence in a single leap? The shopkeeper sighed helplessly, thinking that peerless divine arts weren't so easily obtained. Still, he handed Li Jing 2 secret boxes, a purple crystal sphere and a golden box. But just as Li Jing reached out, another hand interrupted him. Chu Xiu coldly declared that he wants to buy all the secret boxes in the shop. And with his memories from his previous life, he instantly recognized Li Jing. This guy was the exact household servant who, in the original storyline, would obtain a major lucky chance in Yanbao town and become an overlord of a region. That meant the strongest cultivation technique was hidden inside one of the boxes in the shop, probably one of those 2 boxes. Li Jing, visibly furious, claimed that he wanted to buy those 2 boxes first. The shopkeeper, on the other hand, was suddenly trapped between 2 customers he couldn't afford to offend. But Chu Xiu simply asked in a calm yet chilling tone whether Li Jing had any objections. Overwhelmed by Chu Xiu's imposing presence, Li Jing tried to intimidate him, stating that he wouldn't be bullied even though he was just a servant. He belonged to the Li family, one of the 3 great families of Tongzhou Prefecture. Chu Xiu gave a mocking laugh. Earlier this fucker said he didn't want to be a servant for a lifetime, but when things come to a head, he still uses the Li family to bully others. Just like he's trying to do now, he's nothing but a servant, yet he dares to try to suppress him? How arrogant can a mere lackey be? Chu Xiu casually raised his hand, and almost immediately his men moved in. Scared shitless, Li Jing, with his mere body-tempering realm cultivation, had no way to fight them all. He stammered, wanting to talk things over. Chu Xiu sneered inwardly. Li Jing was so weak-willed, so it's no wonder that after becoming an overlord, he turned into a petty villain who committed every imaginable evil. This time around, he won't get that chance. Chu Xiu ordered his men to take everything, and under Yuer's stunned gaze, and Li Jing's utter helplessness, every secret box in the shop was swept clean. Watching them being carried away, Li Jing felt an unbearable pain in his chest. Beyond humiliation, it felt as if something irreplaceable had been stolen from him. He collapsed to his knees, gritting his teeth as he swore to retaliate. This wasn't over. Inside a lodging nearby, Chu Xiu began the next phase. Knowing from the game that certain treasures required a special trigger, he took out a small knife and let a single drop of blood fall onto the purple crystal sphere. The instant the blood touched it, a violent purple energy erupted as the crystal activated. His guess was correct. The shell shattered, revealing a glowing green jade slip. This was it, and as he absorbed the contents, a torrent of energy surged around him. This was a Taoist secret classic, pre-heaven power, a 4th transformation cultivation technique. It can cultivate pre-heaven true qi, resist 100 diseases, regulate emptiness and fullness, nourish the foundation, and make true qi endless. No wonder Li Jing was able to advance by leaps and bounds and reach the peak in the plot. After all, normal cultivation techniques are divided into 9 transformations. The first transformation is the lowest, the 9th transformation is the highest. The first 3 transformations can serve as inheritance techniques for small sections. The middle 3 transformations are considered treasures in the entire Jianghu and allow one to found a sect. The latter 3 transformations are all in the hands of major sects in Jianghu. They are rare in the world and extremely precious. Above the 9th transformation, there are 2 more levels which can be called supreme and peerless. But even if this was given to Chu Xiu at present, he couldn't practice them. However, this pre-heaven power can wash and refine the body, reshape the foundation, and was not restricted by age. It is simply custom-made for him. With pre-heaven power, he has a foundation to settle down and get on with his life amidst the internal strife of the Chu family. Anyway, there were so many secret boxes left, so maybe they can bring him more surprises. Meanwhile, Li Jing went to the 7th lord of the Li family, and after offering his humble greetings, the Li family merchant caravan leader, Li Tong, ranked 7th, told him to sit down and drink. He can even ask the shopkeeper to call a girl up for him. But Li Jing wasn't having none of that. He urgently begged for help, claiming he was robbed in town not long ago. He stated that he announced his name, but the other party actually looked down on the Li family. Li Tong, a bit annoyed, asked who actually dares to rob a member of the Li family, before inquiring what exactly happened. Li Jing narrated everything, and after listening, Li Tong told him not to worry. Even a servant of the Li family was not someone those small families could afford to provoke. He would send someone to inquire just who exactly was so arrogant. Li Jing thanked the 7th lord, and about half an hour later, another servant rushed in with a report. They found out who the culprit was, and it turned out to be from the Chu family. Hearing this, Li Tong told Li Jing that the matter was a bit troublesome. After all, status in the world depends on background. Li Jing knows it too. And among the 3 major families in Tongzhou, the Shin family was first, the Chu family was second, and their Li family was the weakest. Not to mention him, a mere merchant caravan leader, even if the 3rd young master Li came personally, he couldn't help him. So it was better to provoke less trouble. And although Li Jing begrudgingly agreed, he still couldn't swallow the humiliation. But then Li Tong wondered why a young master of the Chu family would come to this poor remote place. So he asked which young master of the Chu family. The servant replied that it was the 2nd young master, Chu Xiu. And upon hearing Chu Xiu's name, Li Tong began laughing with a pleased expression. Then he suddenly told Li Jing that he would take charge of this matter for him. Li Jing was puzzled since Chu Xiu was the 2nd young master of the Chu family, not a steward like Li Tong. So, could they afford to offend him? Li Tong replied smugly that even if it was a Chu family steward, he really wouldn't dare to provoke them. But Chu Xiu was an exception, because in the Chu family, everyone despised him. He was cowardly and fearful of trouble, and his status in the Chu family was even lower than a steward. Li Tong got up and told Li Jing to follow. They were going to meet the trash 2nd young master of the Chu family. After all, in this tiny place like Yuanao town, it was rare to have some fun. Li Jing felt a bit conflicted since this description didn't fit the person he met earlier. It was as if those two really weren't the same person. This Chu Xiu person he met was obviously domineering and ruthless, not cowardly and fearful of trouble. Meanwhile, as the scene shifted back to Chu Xiu, he was practicing his newly acquired technique, moving as swift and light as a feather. The blade technique, Blue Dragon inside the sleeve, requires the blade shape to be hidden in the sleeve, while the blade intent is hidden in the body. One blade slash is like a blue dragon exiting the sea, and the level was at least 2nd transformation. Chu Xiu didn't expect to open this kind of martial skill. It was truly an unexpected surprise. The entire blade technique was very simple and easy to learn. Its charm lies only in that supreme blade slash the moment the blue dragon exits the sea. The introduction was simple, and it actually suits the current him just fine. Then a thunderous noise erupted downstairs, demanding to know the whereabouts of Chu Xiu, the one who dares steal from the Li family. Chu Xiu made his way downstairs, where Li Tong and several servants were waiting impatiently. Upon seeing Chu Xiu, Li Jing points in his direction and tells Li Tong. The fatty admits that Chu Xiu had an imposing aura, but he didn't have the right to rob from the Li family. He should hand over the secret box he robbed from Li Jing and apologize. Otherwise, there would be consequences. Chu Xiu gave a contemptuous smile and asked what the consequences were if he didn't hand over the secret box. A servant stepped forward, mocked and stated that his 7th lord asking Chu Xiu to hand over the box and apologize was him giving face. Otherwise, with just these few people of his, he shouldn't dream of leaving Yuanbao town alive today. Chu Xiu found the whole charade to be absurd. He gave a scornful laugh, and without the slightest moment of hesitation, he used the blue dragon inside the sleeve technique and made a light work of the servant. Chu Xiu landed lightly, blade in hand, and declared that he hates being threatened the most. So which freaking bastard was next? Meanwhile, behind the door, Yue witnessed Chu Xiu killing a servant and was instantly scared out of her wits. She never would have imagined that the young master rumored to be weak, timid, and cowardly would kill without the slightest hesitation. The faces of Li Jing and Li Tong turned pale, and as Li Tong tried using the Li family as a shield, Chu Xiu took a step in his direction, and in just a split second later, he was in front of him with the dagger placed near his neck. Chu Xiu coldly stated that with trash like Li Tong, to think he would actually come looking for trouble with someone like him. Li Tong really didn't know his place. Even if the Chu family looks down on him, he was still the second young master, whereas Li Tong was a side branch nobody, so where did he get the confidence to mess with him? Even if he kills Li Tong right now, the Chu family would at most give him a light punishment. Li Tong shuddered violently, cold sweat soaking his clothes. Only then did he understand, the rumors were lies. Chu Xiu was not weak, and hitting him was the same as slapping the Chu family's face. Li Tong mentally scolded himself. He really was an idiot, but unexpectedly, Chu Xiu suddenly pressed the hilt of the dagger against Li Tong's chest and instructed him to take it. Li Tong was stunned for a moment, but as Chu Xiu coldly reiterated his request, Li Tong grabbed hold of the dagger. He took the dagger with his eyes closed, but this seemed laughable to Chu Xiu. Wasn't he just trying to cause trouble just moments ago? Now there's a knife in his hand so he can follow through with his threat. Chu Xiu even tried giving him a helping hand, urging him to take the chance to kill him. Yet Li Tong couldn't even muster the courage to keep holding the dagger, and dropped it with a pathetic demeanor. Li Tong claimed he wouldn't dare, and he was wrong. Chu Xiu repeatedly gave Li Tong a playful slap on a cheek as he stated that he gave the fatty a chance. But he was useless and couldn't even dare with a dagger in his hand. Seriously? Who gave him the courage to come cause trouble for him? Chu Xiu then ordered Li Tong to take the corpse and get out of his sight. Yue watched as Li Tong turned and fled toward the door in panic. She couldn't help but question herself if this was really the same Chu Xiu as before. With his men hurriedly dragging the corpse along, Li Tong, furious and humiliated, immediately took his anger on Li Jing, who cautiously approached when they reached the inn's main hall. He smacked the living daylight of the guy and roared that he should go screw himself. It was all because of his sorry ass for dragging him into this mess. But Li Jing should now remember that even if the third young master protects him, he would make sure he suffers. Night fell and the entire town was bathed in moonlight. Back inside Chu Xiu's lodging, one of his men, Gao Bei, respectfully asked why he was summoned so late. Chu Xiu studied him for a moment, recalling that Gao Bei came to the Chu family when he was just a teenager and has always done odd jobs, completely unknown, and his talent was average. So he's been learning martial arts for nearly 10 years and only just reached the body tempering stage, but he's at least honest. Chu Xiu confessed that he had been falsely accused and exiled to the Nanshan mine, and Gao Bei, being the unlucky one, had been dragged into it, assigned there with him. So did he have any complaints? Gao Bei replied that he'd never thought that way, because being able to serve as the second young master's guard already makes him very happy. Chu Xiu pressed on, stating that Gao Bei had been in the Chu family for over 10 years, working hard, yet he's still just a servant, with only 2 taels of silver a month. Many of the servants who entered the Chu family with him had all become shopkeepers or stewards, yet he claims to harbor no resentment. Gao Bei explained that he'd always been clumsy with words and dull by nature, so being where he currently was already enough for him. Chu Xiu immediately calls that bullshit. Gao Bei was not satisfied, and it was clearly evident no matter how hard he tries suppressing it. Even a mongrel, after being fed prime meat for a year, won't be willing to go back to eating leftovers. Humans were no different. Chu Xiu placed a hand on Gao Bai's left shoulder and promised that if he follows him through hardship, in the future he would share glory with him as well. Gao Bai's eyes ignited with conviction, and he vowed to follow his young master's lead. But Chu Xiu shook his head. Gao Bei didn't understand, not yet at least. Some things are decided by fate, others by effort. And people like them, if they want to rise, they must wager with their lives on the line. In the past, Gao Bei didn't even have the chance to gamble with his life, so now, Chu Xiu wants to give him the chance. He instructed him to go to Mount Shangmong outside Yuanbao town, find the bandit leader and deliver a letter to him. If Gao Bei was capable of doing this, there would be 300 taels of silver as a reward for him. And from that day on, he would also be his trusted aide. Gao Bei struggled internally. If he refuses, his life will never change. Finally, he clenched his fists and replied that he would do as his young master says. Chu Xiu handed him the sealed letter and told him to make no mistake. As Gao Bei vanished into the darkness, Chu Xiu's eyes turned cold. Since Yue wants him dead, she shouldn't blame him for being ruthless. Early the next morning, Chu Xiu's convoy departed. And inside the carriage, Yue casually asked Chu Xiu where Gaobei was. Chu Xiu replied that Gaobei went ahead to Tongzhou Prefecture to report their arrival. A vicious smile crept across Yue's face, knowing full well that her young master would never make it back in this lifetime. Suddenly, Chu Xiu leaned close and smiled strangely, asking Yue if she thinks they would meet bandits on the road. Yue's heart skipped a beat, then feigned being wary as she told Chu Xiu to not say such unlucky things. But Chu Xiu chuckled. The heavens changes without warning and disaster strikes without notice. A person can hide from natural disasters, but man-made calamities were hard to guard against. Yue tried lighting up the tense atmosphere with a laugh, claiming her young master must be joking again. However, a moment later, someone loudly ordered for the carriage to stop. Chu Xiu calmly looked out, already aware that the man-made calamity had arrived. The convoy was blocked on a narrow forest path by bandits. Their leader, Lian Laosan, stood arrogantly in front, demanding the lot step down immediately. Chu Xiu stepped out unhurriedly. If they want silver, he has thousands of taels. Lian Laosan sneered and replied that Chu Xiu's life was worth more. Chu Xiu smiled faintly. Since lives can be bought with money and someone paid for his life, he can also pay to buy it back. Lian Laosan knows who he was, so if he steps aside now, in the future he can ask for as much silver as he wants. But Lian Laosan commend Chu Xiu for having guts. He was like the rumors say. But it's too bad Lian Laosan values keeping his word, so he better not make things difficult. Meanwhile, Yue smiled triumphantly. Asking Lian Laosan to do this was definitely the right move. With him making a move, Chu Xiu definitely won't survive today. Anyway, since Chu Xiu can't buy back his own life, he will just have to buy Lian Laosan's instead. Chu Xiu charged towards Lian Laosan, who was stunned and asked if the second young master was looking for death. He swung his sword, but Chu Xiu sidestepped, thinking that he couldn't feel any inner power from Lian Laosan's moves. Looks like he was just relying on brute strength, and his technique was rough too. But with Chu Xiu's current level, he can only hope to hold out until a chance appears. He countered with his fist, struck the side of the blade to divert its trajectory as he moved closer. Lian Laosan was impressed that Chu Xiu managed to dodge. He swung his sword once more, aiming for Chu Xiu's head, but he lowered his stance and dodged again. This kept happening over and over, one sword strike after the next with Chu Xiu dodging effortlessly, making Lian Laosan frantic with impatience and irritation. However, his men believed the useless young master was stumbling and scrambling, and letting their boss personally handle Chu Xiu really flatters him. Trash will always be trash, but Lian Laosan cursed internally. This brat was really weird and looks pathetic, but he keeps dodging every time. And if he can't even take down a piece of trash, doesn't that make him worse than trash? Lian Laosan roared that the little punk was really pissing him off. If he'd got guts, then he should stop dodging. Chu Xiu was pleased that Lian Laosan had lost his cool. This was his chance. So with that small window, he dashed towards Lian Laosan with his Azure Dragon inside the sleeve technique, nicked his left cheek when he dodged the first strike, then with a devious grin, made a massive wound on his chest as blood gushed out like a fountain. As Lian Laosan's men worriedly asked if he was okay, he couldn't comprehend how it was even possible. If he hadn't dodged in time, Chu Xiu would have taken his life. Meanwhile, Chu Xiu thought of how it was a pity that he'd barely practiced the Azure Dragon in the sleeve technique. Otherwise, Lian Laosan wouldn't have been able to avoid his strike just now. Lian Laosan ordered his men to attack together and kill Chu Xiu, then everyone. So the group charged with their weapons in hand, but before they could launch an all-out assault, someone questioned if they had asked for his permission first before deciding to kill anyone. The bandits froze in shock as another group of bandits joined the fray. Their leader, Manhwa, laughed and said he'd heard there was a big job going on, and from the looks of it, it was true, so how about they take a share of the pie too? Yue watched from the carriage window and wondered why there was another group of bandits. Did the second madam arrange even more people? Before she could think further, Manhwa's men emerged from the road ahead, advancing aggressively. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes as he questioned himself if they were the guys he requested. Anyway, the very moment Lian Laosan recognized Manhwa, his expression changed drastically. He clenched his teeth, then questioned what Manhwa was doing on his turf. What the hell did he really want? Wasn't it obvious? Manhwa laughed coldly. He just wants to fuck Lian Laosan over like he did to him, snatching his business not once or twice, but several freaking times. This time around, however, he would make sure to send him straight to meet the King of Hell. Without wasting another second, Manhwa attacked, his sword flashing through the air like lightning. Lian Laosan hurriedly raised his own blade to block, but it was useless. In the very next moment, His sword was knocked cleanly into the air with a deep wound on his arm, blood splattering out as he stumbled back in shock. He stared at his injured hand, his face turning pale. This was bad luck, and he wasn't foolish enough to know that a wise man doesn't fight when the odds were against him. He told his men to run as he did the same. But it was already too late for that. Manhwa smiled like a demon, and before Lian Laosan could flee, his blade slashed him down mercilessly. Lian Laosan's body was split in two, falling lifelessly on the ground. Seeing this, Lian Laosan's men panicked and bolted in fear, but Manhwa coldly ordered his men to pursue and kill them all. Chu Xiu stood quietly at the back, observing everything. Judging by this yellow-faced guy's moves, he was completely different from Lian Laosan with an unorthodox background. He was a real martial artist with an orthodox heritage. Chu Xiu stepped forward and politely thanked Manhwa. Manhwa turned slightly with a smile, then questioned if Chu Xiu wasn't afraid he would double-cross him. Gao Bei suddenly rushed over before Chu Xiu could answer. He introduced Manhwa as the chief of Mount Shangmeng, whom he ordered him to find. Chu Xiu praised Manhwa for being a smart man. Since he received his letter, Manhwa should know that killing him would get him a few thousand taels of silver at most. But if he refuses to do it, he can get that batch of refined, or he promised in the letter, and replace all that scrap copper and rotten iron his men were using. Manhwa fell silent. Obviously, the choice wasn't hard to decide. Chu Xiu stared at Lian Laosan's corpse, thinking that the second madame was vicious. She won't show any mercy, even to an illegitimate son like him who has almost no chance of inheriting the position of family head. But from the moment Yuer suggested taking the small path, he'd guessed that she had bribed bandits to borrow a knife to kill him. But if she can spend money to have bandits kill him, then he can also use bandits to protect himself. Chu Xiu really didn't lie to Manhwa, and as far as he knows, those ores were very important to the Chu family. Yet Chu Xiu was willing to give them to him. Chu Xiu replied that someone in the Chu family wanted him dead, so why should he care about the supplies for them? Chu Xiu took out his warrant and told Manhwa to use it to get a batch of, or at a low price. But he needed to be quick while he was still the steward. Manhwa comments that big families have so much bullshit and dirty laundry, but Chu Xiu was quite decisive. Anyway, as he head off, he told Chu Xiu to come find him if there were good things like this in the future, because he was very efficient at killing. He can even give him a discount for acquaintances. Manhwa was a bandit with martial arts heritage. Chu Xiu knew who he was. Gao Bei had good luck, and he actually hired someone with quite a background. Chu Xiu then turned slightly toward the carriage. And inside, Yuer was trembling violently, sweat pouring down her forehead. She couldn't help wondering just what had happened. Wasn't Chu Xiu supposed to be trash? How did he so easily seriously injure Lian Laosan? Also, what was with the second group of bandits who helped Chu Xiu? Chu Xiu entered the carriage, where Yuer, acting all pitiful, asked if all the bandits had been repelled. Chu Xiu chuckled softly and replied that they had. But inwardly, he knew the slut was still pretending. He leaned closer, smiling faintly as he pointed out the obvious. He wasn't dead, so was she disappointed? Yuer stammered, wanting her young master to quit joking. It was a good thing the bandits were repelled, so why would she be disappointed? Chu Xiu suddenly grabbed her by the throat, his voice ice-cold as he asked if she really took him for an idiot. He told her to spill everything she knew, otherwise he would kill her. Yuer was finding it difficult to breathe, her face turning purple. She replied that she would talk. Chu Xiu's second mother spent 10,000 taels of silver to hire the bandits. 10,000 taels. What a generous hand. It seems his second mother really hated him that much. Since Chu Xiu stubbornly supported the eldest young master, the second madam deduced he would ruin things sooner or later. She also won over the fourth young master recently, so she wanted to eliminate future trouble once and for all. The master of the Chu family, Chu Zongguang, has 3 wives and 4 sons. Chu Xiu was an illegitimate son, and the probability of him inheriting the family head position was very small. He thought the eldest son, Chu Kai, had the best chance of winning, so he took sides with him early on. But after taking sides, the first wife and Chu Kai no longer took Chu Xiu seriously. They didn't even lend a hand when he was framed by the third brother. The Chu Xiu of the previous life was extremely similar to the old Chu Xiu in the other word, low status and without any means, so he gave up the thought of fighting for the family head position early on. In this life, since he had become Chu Xiu and knew the plot well, he must fight for the position of the Chu family heir. With the Chu family's resources, at least his cultivation can be faster. Chu Xiu asked Yuer for any evidence of the second madam colluding with the bandits. But Yuer replied that the second madam sent a confidant directly to find the bandits. The bandits took the money and did the job without asking much. So no evidence was left. Yuer suddenly grabbed Chu Xiu's leg, pleading she'd said everything so her young master should spare her life. Chu Xiu told her not to worry, he doesn't kill women. Yue felt relieved. She was scared to death just moments ago. But Chu Xiu unexpectedly snapped her neck in one clean motion, claiming he'd lied. And this bitch actually believed that? How naive. Yet she still tried to be a spy for others. 7 days later, Chu Xiu and his men arrived back at Wei Commandery of Tongzhou Prefecture, the main house of the Chu family. Chu Xiu stared outside the carriage as the second madame came out to greet him. The second madame was the only daughter of Ding Kaishan, the master of Kaishan Martial Arts Hall in Tongzhou Prefecture, known to be ruthless and vicious. More than 20 years ago, Chu Zongguang put down roots in Tongzhou Prefecture because of their marriage. Chu Xiu, with a flattering smile, greeted her and added that he hadn't seen her for a year, but she had become even younger and more graceful. Although the second madam looked calm and expressionless, she was internally irritated that Chu Xiu made his way back alive. She couldn't help pondering if Yue failed to eliminate Chu Xiu at the small path ahead of Yuanbao town. She asked Chu Xiu where his maid was. Chu Xiu sighed helplessly, replied that Yue's body was too weak, and he accidentally played with her to death. Chu Xiu even pleaded for his second mother to gift him another one. Hearing of Yue's death, the second madam couldn't decide whether Chu Xiu knew of her arrangement with the bandits to kill him. Also, the current Chu Xiu seems like a different person, because a year ago he wouldn't dare speak like this. Anyways, since he was back, he should head inside. His father and the others were all waiting for him. Inside the Chu family's luxurious hall, Chu Xiu respectfully greeted everyone. And at the head seat in the hall was Chu Xiu's father, Chu Zongguang. Chu Zongguang slowly raised his head and pointed out the obvious. Chu Xiu had returned. Chu Zongguang was the family head who started from scratch, relying on a few dozen people, and used over 20 years to make the Chu family one of the 3 major families in Tongzhou Prefecture, surpassing even the Li family, which has been rooted there for over 100 years. Chu Zongguang's strength was at Xiantian, and he has crossed body tempering and blood condensation, where the qi, blood, essence, and bones within his body had all blended into one. That was why, although he'd pushed past 50, he looks even younger than a 40-year-old. Chu Xiu was fully aware that his father didn't care much about family affairs or his 4 sons. He was bent on secluded cultivation, though it's a pity that his martial artist realm hadn't advanced a single step in over 20 years. Chu Zongguang declared that his Chu family had been in Tongzhou Prefecture for over 20 years. Now, they can be considered thoroughly rooted there. Anyway, since the children had also grown up, it was time to decide the position of the family heir. The first wife immediately asked why they needed to decide anything. Her son Chu Kai was the legitimate eldest son of the Chu family, and his strength was the greatest. So of course, he should be the heir. The second madam cut in, stating that what the first wife said wasn't right. They weren't royalty where the eldest son must inherit the throne. And naturally, the master makes the decision on such matters. She then asked the third madam if she agrees with her. The third madam, previously a servant, replied that she doesn't understand anything. So naturally, whatever the master says goes. Chu Zongguang had had enough, and declared that he'd made his decision on this matter. Chu Kai, Chu Xiu, Chu Sheng, and Chu Shang all hold parts of the family business. So in 1 year's time, whoever makes the greatest progress, the heir position will be theirs. Do they all agree? After the declaration was made, the atmosphere in the Chu family's grand hall grew suffocatingly silent. Patriarch Chu Zongguang sat high above, his presence alone radiating unquestionable authority. Below him, the wives and children stood in silence, each secretly calculating their next move in the inevitable battle for succession. Chu Xiu observed everything with cold detachment. Though the so-called elders of the Chu family carried the title of seniority, in truth, they were nothing more than chess pieces. Not a single one of them dared to utter a word against Chu Zongguang's will. Absolute power still rested firmly in the hands of the man seated at the very top. On one side stood the first madam and her eldest son, Chu Kai. Both were arrogant by nature, disdainful of restraint, and had even dared to confront the patriarch head-on more than once. What they failed to realize was that such insolence only deepened Chu Zongguang's disgust toward them. The second madam posed an entirely different kind of threat, calculating, ruthless, and vicious in her methods. She had long coveted the position of heir for her own son. Unfortunately, Chu Sheng was a man of brute courage with no talent for scheming, and was also utterly incapable of concealing his ambitions. Among them all, the third madam was the most shrewd. On the surface, she appeared gentle and seemingly indifferent to power struggles. Yet it was precisely this carefully crafted facade of virtue that earned the patriarch's favor, allowing her son to become the most cherished child in the household. Having seen through the true intentions of every single person present, Chu Xiu nevertheless found Chu Zongguang the most puzzling of all. Though the patriarch had loudly proclaimed the selection of a successor, his eyes remained cold and detached, as if he truly did not care about the final outcome. At that moment, the first madam spoke up in opposition. She argued that a martial aristocratic family like the Chu family should choose its successor based on genuine strength. As she spoke, she turned toward Chu Xiu with a mocking gaze and asked whether he agrees with what she just said. Inwardly, the first madam calculated coldly. As long as Chu Xiu sided with her and created a balance of power, even if the patriarch favored someone else, he would not be able to act too blatantly. This piece on the chessboard, she was determined to claim it. Yet, to everyone's surprise, Chu Xiu merely clasped his hands and respectfully stated that his father naturally had his own reasons for doing this, so he had no objections. The moment those words fell, the atmosphere in the hall twisted strangely. The second madam stared in disbelief. How could the man she had secretly ordered assassinated stand there so calmly and sided with her, as if nothing had ever happened? Meanwhile, the first wife burned with fury. This chess piece had dared to defy her will. Chu Kai finally lost his patience. He shouted that Chu Xiu was weak and spineless, demanding to know whether he even understood what he was saying. He gave him one last chance to state his true thoughts. What Chu Kai did not know was that behind that obedient exterior lurked a monster, silently waiting for the moment to erupt. Chu Xiu responded softly, merely reminding his elder brother that he was only following their father's wishes. With a thunderous slam of his palm, Chu Zongguang ended the pointless quarrel. The decision had already been made. Anyone who dared to oppose his decision would be openly challenging the patriarch's authority. Under the crushing weight of his fury, the entire hall fell into absolute silence once more. But Chu Xiu was not finished. With an air of indifference, he calmly proposed that the patriarch grant him additional business assets to manage. He reasoned that the Nanshan mine was far too insignificant for him to earn merit or properly demonstrate his capabilities in front of everyone present. Chu Zongguang narrowed his eyes suspiciously. The son who had remained silent for so many years had finally begun to reveal his ambition. That piercing gaze seemed intent on seeing straight through Chu Xiu's thoughts. The wives were all stunned, so the display of weakness earlier had merely been an act. His true objective was to vie for the position of family head. At that moment, Steward Lu spoke up with thinly veiled ridicule. He accused Chu Xiu of overstepping his bounds and sneered that all he needed to do was properly manage that single mine. For a mere servant to openly humiliate a young master in the Grand Hall. This alone was proof of just how low Chu Xiu's status had once been within the family. Yet Chu Xiu wasn't angry. He simply raised a finger and lightly beckoned Steward Lu to come closer. That calm expression concealed a chilling killing intent, one that no one present had yet noticed. Steward Lu maintained his arrogant expression. As he walked closer, he sneered provocatively, assuming that since he had been standing too far away, Chu Xiu wanted him to come closer so he could hear those words more clearly. Suddenly, a dull, bone-shattering punch rang out. In the blink of an eye, Chu Xiu unleashed a brutal strike. Steward Lu had no time to react and spurted out a mouth full of fresh blood, then collapsed onto the floor, barely clinging to life. But Chu Xiu didn't stop there. With a cold indifference, he stomped down on the wretched body of Steward Lu. This was not an act of impulse, but a declaration of a new order being established. Anyone who dared show him disrespect would pay a heavy price. From the three wives to his three brothers, the entire Chu family stared in disbelief, unable to accept what they had just witnessed. The second madam immediately fell into deep thoughts, wondering whether Chu Xiu had truly gone mad, or if this was the real monster that had been hiding in plain sight all along. With a furious slam of his palm, Chu Zongguang rose to his feet. Rage erupted like a violent storm as he roared, demanding to know what Chu Xiu thought he was doing. Daring to commit such ruthless violence in front of him and so many senior members of the clan, Chu Xiu calmly apologized to his father. Yet his words were razor-sharp. He asserted that for a servant to interrupt his master's words was an act of extreme insolence, and that this punishment was merely a necessary measure to restore discipline and safeguard the dignity of the Chu family. Chu Xiu looked down at the man passed out on the floor, his gaze devoid of even a trace of pity. In a cold voice, he added that if someone like this were at the Nanshan mine, he would have long since been discarded and used as a sky lantern. His father might be merciful, but to him, a servant's disrespect was utterly unforgivable. Witnessing his son's brutality yet undeniable logic, Chu Zongguang could not help but fall into contemplation. Deep down, he had to admit that Chu Xiu was right. Regardless of whose man the steward was, he was still nothing more than a servant. His own prolonged seclusion had allowed these subordinates to forget their place and disregard the hierarchy within the household. Nevertheless, in order to preserve the family's public dignity, Chu Zongguang chose to close the matter. He reminded his son that this was the Chu family estate, not the Nanshan mine, and ordered that Chu Xiu be fined 3 months of his stipend to cover the steward's medical treatment. A light, symbolic punishment meant only as a warning. Chu Xiu lowered his head and calmly accepted the order. But he did not stop there. With calculated composure, he posed a pointed question to his father. Was he truly expected to guard that remote mine forever? If so, what meaning did this grand gathering to choose a successor even hold for him? Chu Zongguang fell silent, stroking his chin thoughtfully. Though he had never intended to let Chu Xiu inherit the family's head position, standing before the entire clan, he understood that he could not treat a son who had just demonstrated such terrifying capabilities with blatant unfairness. The first wife could no longer hide her agitation. She spoke sharply, accusing Chu Xiu of openly assaulting someone in the Grand Hall as a direct challenge to the patriarch's authority, insisting that the matter could not simply be brushed aside. However, Chu Zongguang had already reached his decision. He gave a harsh retort, asking whether she expected Chu Xiu to pay with his life for the sake of a mere steward. Then he declared that once the merchant caravan from the Yen Kingdom returns, all managerial authority over it would be handed to Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu clasped his hands and thanked his father, a faint, meaningful smile tugging on his lips. He had achieved the first objective of his plan, to reclaim his standing and expand his influence within the Chu family. Inwardly, Chu Xiu mocked the foolishness of the first madam and her son, Chu Kai. Born into a great clan, yet incapable of controlling their emotions, they always chose to clash head-on with Chu Zongguang. To him, a man so much older yet still scrambling to compete with his younger siblings for the position of heir was nothing more than a useless waste. The family meeting ended beneath a suffocating atmosphere. With a wave of his hand, Chu Zongguang dismissed everyone and stepped out of the grand hall. The second madam could not stop watching Chu Xiu's retreating figure. She had once believed her greatest enemies were only the first madam and her son. Never had she imagined that the once useless son of a lowly deceased concubine, forgetting she was one herself, would now possess such terrifying ambition and presence. The scene shifted to the second madam's private residence, a luxurious compound shrouded in silence. Inside, Chu Shang could not hide his panic. He questioned his mother anxiously, asking why the assassin she had sent had failed, and how Chu Xiu had managed to survive and return alive. The second madam admitted bitterly that she had been careless. She had never expected that after just 1 year at the Nanshan mine, Chu Xiu would undergo such a drastic transformation. However, she quickly reassured her son. The Chu family, she insisted, would never allow a madman who dared to strike in front of the patriarch, someone like Chu Xiu, to inherit the clan. Then she revealed her trump card. The managers within the merchant caravan assigned to Chu Xiu were all her people. They would ensure that he tasted utter failure. A vicious smile spread across her face. With the enormous sums she had spent to buy loyalty, she was confident that even if Chu Xiu held the title of caravan overseer, he would soon realize that he could not command a single person. Meanwhile, Chu Xiu led Gao Bei straight toward the clan's medicine pavilion, the most important source of cultivation resources for the Chu family's descendants. Along the way, Gao Bei voiced his concern, asking whether the people in the pavilion would truly hand over the cultivation resources that had long been monopolized by the eldest young master. Chu Xiu replied indifferently that those old rules would have to change, starting today. Upon entering the medicine pavilion, the chubby steward, Steward Su, greeted them with forced hospitality. With mocking courtesy, he referred to Chu Xiu as a distinguished guest, remarking that the second young master had never set foot at the medicine pavilion, before asking what important matter had brought him there today. Gao Bei immediately demanded that he hand over all cultivation resources allocated to Chu Xiu over the past year. Hearing this, Steward Su's expression changed instantly. He let out a scornful laugh, saying the second young master must be joking. Chu Xiu's resources, he claimed, had always been collected by the eldest young master on his behalf. Why come demanding them now? His contempt was so blatant that he did not even attempt to hide it. Chu Xiu's gaze hardened. He coldly asked who had given him permission to hand over his resources to someone else, when neither him nor his father had ever authorized such a thing. The fatty steward remained stubborn, provoking him further and telling him to take the matter up with the eldest young master instead. Very good, Chu Xiu said softly. Suddenly, his eyes lit up with a murderous glow, a clear sign that a shitstorm was about to descend. His patience had been completely exhausted, and before he could react, a sudden thunderous slap sent Steward Su flying. But the one who struck was not Chu Xiu. It was the chief steward of the medicine pavilion, who had already witnessed Chu Xiu's terrifying authority earlier and knew exactly what kind of monster now stood before them. The chief steward erupted in fury. He viciously berated the idiotic fatty, cursing him for daring to spout nonsense in front of the second young master. He asked whether he still understood the hierarchy between superiors and subordinates. The fatty steward could only groan in agony. He could not comprehend why his superior had reacted so violently. He tried to open his mouth to explain himself, but the chief steward immediately shouted for him to shut the fuck up. It seems the senior steward was desperate to earn the young master's forgiveness. So turning towards him, he instantly changed his tone. With utmost respect, he begged Chu Xiu to be magnanimous toward this ignorant fool. He assured him that all cultivation resources had been properly stored. He even added that he personally packed a bottle of top-grade blood condensation pills as compensation. Chu Xiu accepted this. His response was short and sharp. There will not be a next time. Only after watching Chu Xiu and Gao Bei leave did the chief steward of the medicine pavilion finally dare to breathe freely. The oppressive pressure from the second young master's presence had been overwhelming. Even a seasoned veteran like him was drenched in cold sweat. Finally, the monster was gone. The fat steward remained in shock. Clutching his burning cheek, he asked bitterly why the chief steward had struck him so harshly while treating that useless young master with such respect. The chief steward replied coldly that it had been for his own good. Otherwise, he would already be dead. He then revealed the truth. Just moments earlier, Chu Xiu had beaten Steward Lu, one of the first madam's people, to the brink of death right in the middle of the grand hall. Upon hearing that even Steward Lu had nearly been beaten to death, the fat steward began trembling violently. His face drained of all color. The chief steward issued a stern warning. From this day forward, he must treat the second young master with more respect than any other young master in the estate. There was one thing he needed to carve into his bones. Chu Xiu was no longer the weak and useless second young master of the past. Meanwhile, Chu Xiu walked away with steady, confident strides. A faint, meaningful smile lingered on his lips as fear and reverence followed him wherever he went. With the cultivation resources reclaimed and his authority firmly established, the balance of power within the Chu family had officially begun to tilt, entirely according to his will. The scene then shifted to Chu Xiu's private residence, which was a bit run down due to his long absence. Inside, Gao Bei informed his young master about how imposing he was just moments ago. Even the grand steward of the medicine pavilion was so polite to him. Chu Xiu replied that it wasn't out of politeness, but a feeling of reverential respect mixed with fear and wonder. You see, evil cuts both ways. And if he cannot be so kind that everyone respects him, then he must be so evil that everyone fears him. Gao Bei scratched the back of his head sheepishly and said honestly that he didn't understand. Chu Xiu wasn't surprised by this response. After all, if Gao Bei wasn't anything but the obvious, he wouldn't have muddled along for so many years without even becoming a steward. Chu Xiu then instructed him to go find some wooden stakes and arrange a training setup in the courtyard. He wants to practice his blade techniques. Inwardly, Chu Xiu was fully aware that the path of martial Dao was nothing more than talent, perseverance, opportunity, and comprehension. However, his talent was average, his comprehension was unknown, and the strength needed to seize opportunities presented was almost non-existent at this point. Therefore, for now, he can only put effort into perseverance. As Chu Xiu makes himself a cup of herbal tea, he assessed the 30 packs of Buki powder he received from the Grand Steward. Apparently, he should have received 2 packs of it per month and 3 blood condensation pills per year. But in addition to the extra Buki powder, he was also given 10 blood condensation pills of high quality. As things stands, it seems the Grand Steward certainly knew how to handle things. Then, taking a sip, he explained that Buki powder was simple to concoct. It could replenish qi and strengthen the body, aiding cultivation. It was also perfect for cultivating the Xiantian Gong. Chu Xiu then entered a closed-door cultivation to the very next day. He knew that Taoist cultivation methods were moderate and peaceful, and the more one cultivates, the more abundant one's energy becomes. In this aspect, it far surpasses other cultivation methods. Anyway, after a night of cultivation, his miraculous meridians run automatically, and his 8 veins were all connected. His body already possesses the Xiantian Gong True Qi, so the results weren't bad. What was next was practicing his blade techniques. In the courtyard, Gao Bei had done as he instructed, and as Chu Xiu assessed his situation carefully, he realizes that his current Azure Dragon inside the sleeve only has the blade form but lacks the blade intent. So, he must practice the most basic blade swings repeatedly. Chu Xiu moved with light steps and fast reflexes with lightning speed, cutting down the wooden dummies with ease. And in the blink of an eye, he was on the other end of the courtyard with every target sliced in half. Gao Bei, with a serving tray, approached his young master and said he'd heard some news. The stewards leading the caravan that had been assigned to Chu Xiu were all the second madam's people. They say that when the caravan returns, they intend to give Chu Xiu a display of severity to humble him. Chu Xiu then asked Gao Bei if the other side spread the matter so blatantly. Gao Bei confirmed this, and added that this was also spread by one of the second madam's maidservants. Chu Xiu gave a sly smile, thinking the second madam and her son really didn't take him seriously. But it was a pity they all thought wrong, because in his eyes, people who do not listen were no different from dead people. Chu Xiu told Gao Bei to accompany him to Shangmang Mountain the next morning. They were going to find the bandit leader Manhwa. Gao Bei was immediately scared out of his wits, so Chu Xiu asked what he was afraid of. It wasn't like bandits eat people. And moreover, Manhwa would become their greatest assistance. Early the next day at Shangmang Mountain, Chu Xiu met up with the bandits as planned. He got straight to the point, saying the matter he wished to discuss with Manhwa was somewhat significant, so he needed to order his men to withdraw. However, Manhwa, who now had a different hair color to match his new outfit, replied that there was no need. The two guys behind him were his brothers with whom he had life-and-death friendships, so there was nothing to hide from them. Chu Xiu reluctantly let this matter be and spoke frankly. He wants to talk to the person behind Manhwa. He knew that they weren't ragtag bandits, not initially anyway, and this made Manhwa question him what else they could be if not that. Chu Xiu revealed that they were giant bandits, specifically the remnants of the Northern Land's 36 giant bandits. This initially stunned the three into complete silence, before Manhwa swung his blade in Chu Xiu's direction. But Chu Xiu expected this attack and countered with the Azure Dragon inside the sleeve. He swiftly evaded the sword strike, close the distance, and before Manhwa could react, the fight was over with a dagger already at his throat. Chu Xiu told Manhwa to instruct his men to back off, because if he really wanted to make an issue out of this, even if this place wasn't governed by Northern Yen, once a wanted order comes down, he would have been dealt with long ago. Manhwa asked how Chu Xiu knew of their background. He replied that it was a guess, before explaining that Manhwa's martial arts was orthodox, and the troops' discipline was strict. Added to that, he mentioned the word Chilean. Therefore, aside from the Chilean Iron Cavalry among the Northern Land's 36 giant bandits, he really can't think of anything else. Manhwa cursed slightly when he realized his own big mouth was what ratted them out. He really should start watching out for whatever he says. Anyway, what no one knew was that the original plot was what truly allowed Chu Xiu to confirm their identity. Decades ago, the Northern Yen was in great chaos, and the 36 giant bandits emerged out of nowhere, daring even to plunder the Northern Yen imperial court. But later, the Northern Yen rose again and joined forces with the major martial arts sect, the extreme north floating snow city, to crush the 36 giant bandits in one fell swoop. The various leaders were either dead or crippled, never to become a significant force again. In the original plot, there was news of the remnants of the Northern Land's 36 giant bandits appearing in Wei Commandery. Chu Xiu asked Manhwa if he had now shown his sincerity, but the guy was more interested in knowing just what exactly Chu Xiu wants to trade with his boss. He added that telling him first was the same as telling his boss. Chu Xiu confidently stated that he knows the whereabouts of their Chilean Iron Cavalry's great chieftain, the red-faced Heavenly King Pang Hu, before asking if that was information enough to trade. Manhwa, completely dumbfounded by this sudden news, questioned Chu Xiu if he was seriously telling the truth. Chu Xiu simply stated that once he sees the person behind Manhwa, the truth will naturally be revealed, and he wouldn't dare to lie once they were there anyways. Manhwa agreed and told the young master to follow him. His boss was in North Shangmang Mountain, and it will take a few days to get there. 5 days later, at the North Shangmang Mountain, Manhwa explained to Chu Xiu that after coming to Wei Commandery, his boss established a mountain stronghold there, and just in case they built a small stronghold outside. Chu Xiu should wait there for a moment while he goes to report. Then in just a few minutes, Manhwa brought a tall sturdy guy inside the tent and introduced him as Han Bao, or simply Boss Han. He was formerly one of the great chieftain's personal guards. Boss Han asked Chu Xiu if he was the one who claimed to know the great chieftain's whereabouts. Chu Xiu calmly confirms this, and he also noticed that Han Bao was at the peak blood condensation realm. He was much stronger than him. Han Bao told Chu Xiu to cut the crap and get straight to the heart of the matter. What exactly did he want in return? If Chu Xiu's demand an exorbitant price, then he shouldn't blame him for getting rough. Chu Xiu clarified that the news was intended as a greeting gift for Boss Han anyway, and according to what he knew, after the great chieftain Pang, who was heavily injured by the people of the Northern Yen Imperial Court, he was currently recovering his strength in the desolate mountains of Liaodong Commandery in the north. Han Bao wanted to know if what Chu Xiu just said was true. and he replied that if Boss Bao didn't believe him, he can send someone to Broken Soul Valley in Liaodong Commandery to check. There were secret codes left by the great chieftain Pang. As Chu Xiu said this, he was inwardly pleased with himself because he didn't expect these small details from the game settings to be such a big help. Anyway, after instructing Chu Xiu to sit, Han Bao informed him that he would send someone. If they can really find the great chieftain, he would owe Chu Xiu a favor. But he needed to know what he wanted in return. Chu Xiu curiously questioned Han Bao's plan after finding Chieftain Pang Hu. Han Bao confidently replied that he would naturally take his men of the stronghold to seek refuge with the great chieftain. Chu Xiu disagrees with this plan, claiming it was flawed because the great chieftain Pang was currently resting and recuperating. Not only would that be useless, but it would also increase the risk of exposure. He wouldn't let them go either. So what they should do was accumulate money, provisions, and cultivation resources to prepare for his rise. But Han Bao insists that these matters will be decided once the great chieftain was found. Now, he asked once again, what's Chu Xiu's intentions? Chu Xiu simply wants to cooperate with them to make money. Han Bao was visibly delighted with this reply and told Chu Xiu to explain in detail. There were many bandits in Shangmang Mountain who frequently rob caravans and kill for money. Therefore, more and more caravans were switching to the time-consuming and laborious main roads, or arranging large numbers of guards, and this was making Han Bao's business scarcer by the day. Boss Han confirms this and inquires what should be done. Chu Xiu replies that nothing can be accomplished without rules. If there were no rules, they would set the rules. And as long as caravans hand over a portion of their wealth, they can be escorted across the mountain. This way, it benefits both the caravans and Han Bao. Han Bao was immediately displeased with this idea, because he would be making enemies of all the bandits in Shangmang Mountain. But Chu Xiu stated that one voice of absolute authority in the entire Shangmang Mountain was enough? Or did Boss Han lack the confidence to deal with those disorganized mobs? A sly grin spread across Han Bao's face as he declared that he didn't lack confidence. If not for his injuries remaining unhealed, he would have resolved that bunch of trash long ago. Realizing that Han Bao was actually a Xiantian expert before, it was clear that Chu Xiu had misjudged him. Since Chu Xiu had given him such a good idea, Han Bao asked if he wanted anything. Though Chu Xiu claimed it was very simple, he informed Han Bao that he also have a caravan in the Chu family, and hoped they can enter and exit Shangmang Mountain without obstruction. Additionally, he also hopes Han Bao can help him kill some people. The first condition was no problem, but for the second, wanting him, Han Bao, to be a hired thug, just that piece of news wasn't enough. Of course, Chu Xiu had expected this outcome, so he told Han Bao that he can give him more than just a simple intel, but also inform him about passing caravans in advance. This way, he won't have to worry about a wasted trip. Chu Xiu asked if this was enough for a deal, and Han Bao agrees. Chu Xiu also plans to send the news of the Chu family's caravan to Han Bao. He should consider it as a greeting gift. But hearing that Chu Xiu wants him to rob his own caravan, he asked what the meaning of that was. Chu Xiu calmly explains that it was the Chu family's caravan, not his personally. Han Bao was pleased, fully aware that when it comes to viciousness, no one can compare to the disciples of aristocratic families. They were actually so ruthless to their own people. Chu Xiu got up and decided to take his leave. It was a pleasure doing business with Han Bao, and if there's any news, he will send a carrier pigeon to him. Back at the Wei Commandery of Tongzhou Prefecture, somewhere inside the main house of the Chu family, servants were loading cargo crates onto a wagon. Chu Xiu walked in on them and demanded to know who exactly gave the order to depart. Zhang Quan stepped forward and introduced himself as the caravan steward, then offered his greetings to the second young master. Chu Xiu asked who was in charge of this caravan at present. And of course, Steward Zhang replied that it was under the second young master's charge. So, if the caravan was under the second young master's charge, then who allowed Steward Zhang to load the cargo and set off just now? How much silver did the last batch of goods sell for? What was brought back? And what was being transported in this batch? Have Steward Zhang ever discussed these things with him? Steward Zhang begged for forgiveness, before explaining that due to his absence, he asked for instructions from the family head before acting. Time, after all, waits for no one. But the second young master should rest assured there will be absolutely no problem with this trip. If there are any mistakes, he was at his disposal. Chu Xiu placed a hand on Zhang Quan's shoulder and told him he had done very well, but he just hoped Steward Zhang doesn't regret it later on. Steward Zhang thanked Chu Xiu for the praise and added that he would never regret working for the Chu family. Inwardly, he thought that he had gone back and forth with the caravan countless times. So what problem could there be, and what was there to regret? Since Steward Zhang was arrogant enough to sign his death warrant, Chu Xiu simply wished the poor bastard the best of luck. The very second the caravan set off, Chu Xiu told Gao Bei to notify Han Bao and his men of the caravan's route and schedule. Meanwhile, on the way, one of Steward Zhang's underlings was worried that his boss had offended the second young master. He heard that after returning from the mining area, Chu Xiu was different. Steward Zhang was fully aware of this and didn't care. After all, they were the third young master's people. When the guy asked if Zhang Quan wasn't afraid Chu Xiu will deal with them, he replied that the Chu family was a great clan and must follow rules. They haven't broken any rules, so Chu Xiu can't touch them. Though the guy kept silent, he couldn't help feeling like this matter wasn't that simple. Steward Zhang loudly informed everyone to remember to drop the goods immediately if they really encounter bandits. Their lives were more important than anything. Everyone agreed to this, and it didn't take long for darkness to descend. Under the full moon, Steward Zhang instructed his guards to move a bit further ahead. There was a decent-sized cave nearby, and after a quick inspection, they would rest there. But a few distance away, someone gave a reply that there was no need for that anymore. If they want to rest that night, then they would make sure he and his men rest there to their heart's content. The now scared Steward Zhang yelled in absolute terror that they've encountered bandits, then bolted the very second he got off his wagon horse, instructing his servants to do the same. But at this point, it was already too late. They've been boxed in. Steward Zhang run into Manhwa and two of his men. He asked where Steward Zhang thought he was going. Steward Zhang freaked out even more when he realized that the bandits came prepared. Manhwa mocked the poor guy before passing Chu Xiu's message to him, telling him to have a safe journey to the afterlife. And it was in this moment that Zhang Quan realized he fucked up. Recalling Chu Xiu's behavior in wishing them farewell, he finally understood the weight of those words. He tried to plead for his life, but Manhwa had no intention of letting him live. He dashed towards Steward Zhang with his huge sword, and in the span of a split second, released the poor guy off his head. At that point, his men had already dealt with the remaining servants, so he instructed them to go open the cargo. They needed to see just how the greeting gift Chu Xiu gave them was. That very night, news about the caravan being robbed reached the house of the Chu family. So all branches were informed to report to the council hall immediately to discuss the matter. On the way, Chu Xing asked her mother whether she thinks this matter has anything to do with Chu Xiu. After all, Steward Zhang and the others just offended him, and then something happened right after. The second madam replied honestly that she didn't know. Logically speaking, Chu Xiu shouldn't have the guts. And besides, he didn't have the ability to hire the Shangmong mountain bandits. But before they have evidence, his son shouldn't speak carelessly, otherwise it will make his father unhappy. Chu Xing nodded with understanding as the two made their way inside the council hall, where Chu Zongguang, together with his other sons and wives, were already present. Two servants reported the entire situation to Chu Zongguang. The bandits killed everyone on sight, and they don't know why. Chu Zongguang dismissed them after hearing them out. But they need to remember this lesson and be more careful in the future. Chu Zongguang was going back into seclusion when Chu Xiu respectfully interrupted him. He points out that the caravan had no leader at present, so he was willing to lead another caravan through Shangmong Mountain once again. This request not only startled Chu Zongguang for a bit, but completely shocked his other sons and their mothers. After all, caravan transport had always been the most dangerous task, and family disciples had never led the team before, so what kind of trouble was Chu Xiu bringing upon himself? Also, he had no experience at all, so was he asking for death? Chu Xiu explained that right now the caravan was in a state of panic, and if there wasn't someone of sufficient weight to lead, it will be difficult to set off. Especially the pharmacy goods, they cannot be delayed. And as a direct descendant of the Chu family, he should lead the charge and boost morale. Therefore, he was asking his father for permission. Chu Zongguang didn't expect Chu Xiu's awareness to be this high, and he also agrees with his second son. The caravan indeed cannot be delayed. Chu Zongguang gave Chu Xiu the go-ahead, but warned him to be careful. Chu Xiu thanked his father for his concern. However, Chu Sheng scoffed inwardly at this. He thought Chu Xiu was a brainless fool for snatching up this thankless and dangerous task. Back outside at the caravan pavilion, several servants kept gossiping about the incident, while the caravan guards stood around dejectedly. But they couldn't blame them for discussing and pointing fingers. The goods this time around weren't saved, and quite a few people died. The whole thing sounds too scary. But in that moment, Chu Xiu confidently walked in and told everyone to pack up. The caravan was setting off again, heading to the state of Yen. The guards argued that they just had an incident, so they should rest for a period of time. What if they enter the mountain and get robbed by bandits again? They needed to think of a countermeasure before leaving. Chu Xiu watched their panicked demeanor and realized that his cheap old dad really lost interest in the Chu family's affairs. He seemed to be unbothered as to how spoiled these servants have become. Anyway, resting for a while, thinking of a countermeasure, these things had to be a joke. The ones who died weren't them, and they didn't even suffer a scratch. So why the hell did they need to rest for? The entire crowd of servants got no reply and fell silent. But if they believed they can use this matter as a means to not work, then they were wrong. In the Chu family's business, the caravan treatment was the best, 10 times that of general labor or even more. However, since they are afraid of death and don't want to go, there are plenty of people who do. Chu Xiu called for Gao Bei to go tell the general laborers that those who dare to risk their lives should come to the caravan. Monthly pay was at least 10 taels. If they return smoothly, 0.5% of the profit will be the reward. And as for the scared guards refusing to go, they should find Steward Lu for reassignment. The caravan guards panicked and began to beg their second young master for another chance. They explained that they were just blinded by folly. They were wrong. Chu Xiu agreed to give them another opportunity. Those who want to stay in the caravan should follow him. The group departed that very night, and not long after, they were intercepted by another group of bandits. Their fat leader was Hanbao's subordinate, Feng Yidao. As Feng Yidao called out to his men to come out and make an example of these people, the caravan guards freaked out and cursed with regret. Some complained that if they had known earlier, they wouldn't have stayed. And although it was a bit too late, they still hope they can survive. Chu Xiu just smiled with a knowing grin. Finally, it was showtime.